In 2025, amidst the dazzling lights of Times Square, there are people huddled on the cold concrete, just a few steps away from the Broadway stage. Not because they forgot the way home, but because that is their home. New York, the city that was once a symbol of the American dream, where people believed that as long as you worked hard, you would have the chance to change your life. But today, that very city is gradually becoming a ghost town, not because of a lack of people, but because there are too many people being treated as if they do not exist. The number of homeless people here has surpassed 75,000, the highest in history. And that number continues to rise, even when the economy is said to be recovering. So, what happened? How could a wealthy city like New York allow its people to sleep outdoors, next to garbage dumps, at the foot of million-dollar skyscrapers? In this video, we will delve into New York City and the once vibrant neighborhoods, now quietly desolate, as if erasing themselves from the map of the American dream. This is not a story about poverty, but about neglect, disappointment, and a system that is letting its own people slip away from the line of dignity. Are you ready to see New York through a completely different lens? Let's start this journey. $75,000 per month. That is the average salary of a person in New York City, 18% higher than the national average in the United States. That attractive figure makes many people flock here to realize their dreams of wealth. Skyscrapers are not only symbols of architecture, but also promises that, as long as you try, you will find your place. But then something broke, not just overnight, but little by little, in the very policies, in the rising housing prices, in the silence of the system. New York did not collapse noisily. It quietly withdrew, street by street, person by person, hope by hope, and it is there that a crisis begins. If you pay attention long enough, you will see. Parts of the city are turning into ghost zones. Not because there are no people, but because people live there as if no one can see them anymore. Don't take your eyes off, because right now, I will take you into every hidden corner of New York, something you will never see in the press or any media. Our first stop is the subway, a symbol that once represented the prosperity of New York City, a hallmark of modern life. Now it has become a stage for scenes that make anyone shudder. Our camera brings you scenes that you might have to rewind and watch several times. A homeless man, standing in the middle of a crowded train carriage, casually used the toilet right into the janitor's bucket. Passengers covered their noses and stepped back in fear, but no one dared to speak up, because just one complaint could make them the target of his wrath. And here is the sleeping place of a homeless man. A swarm of rats running out one by one from his thin blanket, as if participating in a parade. I don't understand how he can still sleep soundly as if nothing is happening. Such stories are no longer rare. Passengers share that they often encounter homeless people sprawled on the benches, their clothes filthy, some high on drugs, mumbling nonsensically. They feel uneasy and anxious every time they set foot on the train station.
Only just on the subway, but definitely on the sides when you come out.
But what happens beneath the subway stations in New York City is just the beginning. Everything above ground isn't any better. In Midtown Manhattan, where the buildings are lit up but empty, the tent city has sprung up right in front of the office lobby. Not long ago, this place was the most vibrant center in America. Now, a series of offices are vacant, the glass windows are covered in dust, and police signs are constantly hanging. Right below, makeshift tents have sprung up next to the sidewalks, where once were the entrances to million-dollar companies. The homeless do not come to cause trouble, they are just trying to find a space to survive the night. In fact, some people who used to work in those very buildings are now sleeping right at their feet. There is no longer a clear boundary between the white-collar workers and those who have nowhere to go. This woman is a typical example.
I had a job, he had a job. We lost both of our incomes at once, and that's when we started sleeping in parks.
In recent years, homelessness in New York City has been at its highest rate since the Great Depression.
Times Square, once a symbol of light, freedom, and the American dream. Now, it has become a place where even closing your eyes to sleep can be considered a disruptive act. The homeless person lying on the bench was awakened by the police with a flashlight and orders. Some stood up silently, some reacted, but the outcome was the same. They were driven away, not because they did something wrong, but simply because they were present. Ironically, in a place that once praised freedom. Now, even closing your eyes to sleep can be an act that might be punished. But if Times Square is the glittering mask, then what is happening behind that mask? New Bronx, the new epicenter of the homelessness crisis in New York. When there are no longer enough official shelters, spontaneous transitional camps spring up like mushrooms after the rain, along highways, abandoned parking lots, and even behind churches. A woman waiting in line for a free shower said with a sad laugh, "As long as I have a place to wash up, I feel like a different person." Inside the camp, the smell of mildew, the cries of children, the coughs of the elderly blend with the rumble of vehicles outside. No electricity, no water, no hope. The entire shantytown is like a makeshift patch on the already tattered coat of the city. Can you believe it? Right in the city that spends billions of dollars every year, there are places like this. Where has the government been all this time? This is Charmaine. She has been homeless for over 20 years. Although Charmaine has been placed in a temporary shelter, she still chooses to sleep on the streets. Because the shelter that Charmaine was assigned to was an all-male shelter. Instead of feeling safe, Charmaine would rather sleep on the street.
It's hard to be in a shelter where it's still clustered with people that you don't belong around. Where I'm at, I'm a DV survivor, and I'm in a shelter with all male. So I'm back on the streets, hoping to get placed in the right place, not displaced.
Chairman is not the only case. But what makes people more heartbroken is that the system seems to be normalizing this abnormality. The truth is that New York is not indifferent to the issue of homelessness. More than $4 billion have been spent on the shelter system and support services this year. But many people liken it to pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. The more money, the more procedures. Housing assistance programs and mental health support are organized regularly, but the waiting lists are long each year, and the process is so complicated that many people give up before receiving anything. In addition, instead of creating long-term solutions, many of the city's recent policies have only stopped at erasing the bad image. The measures against homelessness are so unique that only New York City has them. They play loud classical music in the park to drive away the homeless, install segmented benches so that no one can lie down, dismantle the tents at night without prior notice. But when asked, after driving them away, where will they go? No one has an answer. Those actions do not solve the problem. They only make the poor more invisible in the eyes of society. But what troubles many people even more is not just the increase in the number of homeless individuals, but the way this city is gradually getting used to it. People are no longer startled when they see tents by the roadside, no longer surprised to hear someone say, "I'm living on the train." How could New York, the city symbolizing the American dream, allow such hauntingly contrasting images to exist? But if these things have become normal, then what awaits the city ahead? A New York no longer belonging to the people, but only to those who can afford to stay. The paradox is happening right in the heart of Manhattan, with nearly 1 in 6 apartments recorded as not regularly occupied. Many of these are investment properties, purchased by people who have never lived here. While new hotels, luxury apartments, and extravagant shopping malls continue to be built in New York every day, just a few blocks away, shelters are overwhelmed and have to turn people away. There are families who have to sleep in their cars for weeks on end because there are no vacant rooms for them to stay temporarily. On the most expensive streets of the city, where coffee costs $10 and handbags are displayed behind thick glass. There are still people living in tents, lining up for free food from volunteer groups. They call it two New Yorks, coexisting, breathing the same air, but never touching each other. They call it two New Yorks, coexisting, breathing the same air, but never touching each other. There are not just shocking numbers or images. They are reminders that the abnormal has become all too familiar. And when injustice becomes a habit, is the city still a place for people to hope, or just a place for them to learn how to survive? New York has tried, with huge budgets, with a shelter system, with subsidy programs. But sometimes, we have to admit an uncomfortable truth. No matter how hard the system works, if the ground beneath is sinking, all efforts are merely temporary. And that foundation is the housing prices, the cost of living, the urban pace of life that is beyond the endurance of ordinary people. In New York, what is called renting a place just to get by has now become a big gamble. With an average price of nearly $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, even those with stable jobs are struggling to breathe. Danielle, 46 years old, lives in a car with her daughter. She has turned the back of the car into a small living area, arranging space for clothes and a desk to work. Working as a part-time office employee, but her salary is not enough to rent a small apartment. Danielle is not the only case. A newly graduated nurse, an Uber driver, or a Walmart sales associate, they are all in the same race to pay enough rent before the end of the month. For them, the line between having a home and being homeless is becoming more fragile than ever. Just a small event, a job loss, an unexpected medical bill, a breakup, and they can quickly find themselves without shelter. But it's not just the rent. From a simple lunch to utility bills, everything in New York is breathtakingly expensive. A recent report shows that to live comfortably in NYC, a person needs to earn at least $138,000 a year. But tens of thousands of people here earn less than half of that amount. And when inflation causes the prices of food, healthcare, and transportation to rise every month, the gap between employed and homeless is sometimes just one unexpected medical bill or one missed shift. Clearly, they are not lazy. They are just falling behind too quickly compared to the pace of this city. Many people sigh every time they mention their monthly expenses. For them, the cost of living in New York is like the rising sea. You don't see it creeping in every day, but by the time you realize it, you're already neck deep. There was a time when people believed that only the unemployed, drug addicts, or those who had lost their way had to fear the prospect of living on the streets. But New York today is blurring those boundaries. Even families with two stable incomes, who once confidently bought homes, are starting to struggle. Some are going back to renting small rooms. Some others live with relatives or sleep in their cars. This scene is no longer rare. A man in a shirt, still wearing his employee badge, quietly laid a cardboard sheet on the sidewalk near the train station. A couple lives in a small car, where all their activities are confined to this cramped space. The middle class, once the backbone of the city, now like stranded fish, struggling in waters that have become too cramped. In New York now, no one is poor because they are lazy. They are poor because the city is accelerating without waiting for anyone. Perhaps the greatest coldness right now does not come from the weather, but it comes from the feeling. I no longer belong to the place once called home. New York used to be a place of close-knit communities. The Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn, Italians in Queens, Latin American immigrants in the Bronx, neighborhoods with their own identities, where laughter echoed through the windows. But now, those laughter are fading away, replaced by the silence of empty houses, hastily closed shops, and even quiet farewells. And among that indifferent crowd, there is a group of people who have almost disappeared from the collective mind, the homeless. They not only lost their homes, they lost their presence in the eyes of society. Some live in tents, others sleep on the subway or park benches. Places that were once means of transportation or public spaces now have become their final refuge. When a city allows the vulnerable to gradually slip out of sight, the loss is no longer just anyone's. That is a collective loss of trust, of memory, and of the very concept of us that has bound New York together for generations. And perhaps the most haunting thing is not the tents or the long lines of people waiting for a hot meal, but the feeling is that many people are disappearing from this social map, quietly, one by one, as if they never existed. If this city can forget the very people who contributed to its creation, then what will be left for the next generation? And if nothing changes, what awaits New York City ahead? We will see an expensive but desolate city, dazzling with lights but cold at heart. We will witness the next generations growing up with a sense of not belonging anywhere, because even their parents and grandparents were once abandoned by the city. A New York no longer a place where people come to start anew, but a place where they are forced to leave to survive. Houston once had a similar homelessness crisis, but they switched to the housing first model, providing stable housing first, then supporting recovery. As a result, they reduced the number of homeless people by more than 60% in a decade. Meanwhile, Finland goes further. Every citizen has the right to housing, regardless of their circumstances. And they prove that it is not just an ideal, but a realistically achievable goal. New York City, with its potential and creativity, can absolutely achieve the same. But the prerequisite is, it must start with compassion. Changes don't need to start with major laws. Sometimes it starts with very small actions. Some non-profit organizations like Coalition for the Homeless or God's Love We Deliver have helped hundreds of people find their first home after many years. If a city like New York, once the dream of the world, no longer has a place for the poor, the elderly, and those who have contributed, can we still call it a civilized society? And if a country can allow hundreds of thousands of its citizens to sleep outside in the cold, are we building the future? Or are we letting the future collapse day by day, right beneath our feet? New York is still there, but it doesn't look like the New York we used to know. Perhaps the scariest thing is not the empty streets, but the gradual acceptance of the sight of people being left behind. But this city was never built on indifference. It was built from hope, from community, from people who never gave up, no matter how cruel life was. If you ever believed in New York, perhaps now is the time to believe once more. Not with money or policies, but by living and caring more each day. What do you think about what is happening? Please share a feeling or a story that you have witnessed. Because change sometimes starts with us stopping, listening, and not turning away. And if you find stories like this worth listening to, if you believe that the truth needs to be told with kindness and empathy, please subscribe to our channel to join us. Each subscription is a way to keep the forgotten voices continuing to be heard. This video was created with the purpose of analyzing, exploring, and providing a multifaceted perspective on the homelessness crisis in New York. All data, images, and opinions in the video are compiled from publicly available, reputable sources at the time of production. We do not intend to hold any individual, organization, or government accountable, nor do we aim to create negative emotions, confusion, or discrimination against any social group. We believe that understanding and empathy are the first steps towards any positive change.